Welcome to Business Review, a daily program that delves into the latest and most significant economic stories. From stock markets to currency news, Business Review covers the most up-to-date developments in the global finance.
Protesters gathered at a pier in California's Huntington Beach in defiance of a 10 p.m. state curfew put in place to curb a new surge in coronavirus infections. Aerial footage showed roughly 100 protesters, many waving American and Trump 2020 flags. The California Governor Gavin Newsom imposed the curfew on social gatherings and other non-essential activities. The stay-at-home order prohibits non-essential business from 10 p.m. until 5 a.m. each day and applies in the majority of the state's counties. Under California law, local counties can impose more restrictive measures than mandated by the state. The Californian restriction essentially marks a return to the first in the nation's statewide stay-home order that Newsom imposed in March, except it applies only during the designated curfew hours rather than around the clock. Signs of a resurgent public health crisis have emerged more starkly across the country, with officials forced to retreat from tentative steps to normalize daily life during what had been a brief lull in the pandemic. The U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention issued a strong recommendation that Americans refrain from traveling for the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday.
Australia moved a step closer to normal life, easing restrictions in regions affected by COVID-19, with the vast majority of the country seeing no new community infections or deaths for weeks. South Australia, which last week became the epicenter of the country's infections, reported no new community cases and lifted a drastic lockdown earlier than planned, with the state premier saying swift action had avoided disaster. The number of active cases in the state stood at 37 after an outbreak linked to a returned traveller from Britain forced 4,500 people to quarantine. Neighbouring Victoria, which for months fought the pandemic and where 90% of Australia's 907 coronavirus-related deaths have been recorded, relaxed its mask rules, saying they are not required outside and allow larger public gatherings. The state, home to about 6.4 million people, has had no new infections for 23 days, a victory that came after an 111-day lockdown that kept people at home and most businesses shut. With just over 27,800 cases, Australia has done better than most other developed nations in combating COVID-19 thanks to its aggressive response. On Sunday, there were an estimated 88 cases active throughout the country.
With COVID-19 still causing widespread damage across the world, China called for efforts for major economies to promote more inclusive development and improve global governance in the post-pandemic era. The pandemic has affected over 57.4 million people and killed over 1.3 million worldwide, has exposed many weak links in global governance. The international community is wondering what the G20 or Group of 20 can do to make the system better. President Xi of China said the G20 played an irreplaceable role in the global fight against the pandemic and should uphold multilateralism, openness, inclusiveness, mutually beneficial cooperation, and keep pace with the times. Created in 1999, the G20 is the main forum for international cooperation on financial and economic issues. It comprises 19 countries: Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Mexico, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, South Korea, Turkey, Britain, and the United States, plus the European Union. The Chinese president told other G20 leaders that the members should keep support for developing countries and help them overcome the hardships caused by the pandemic, and urged world's leading economies to pursue more inclusive development. Moreover, he noted China has fully implemented the G20 Debt Service Suspension Initiative, the DSSI, while overcoming its own difficulties due to the pandemic, with a total amount exceeding 1.3 billion US dollars. The G20 launched the DSSI in April to address the immediate liquidity needs of low-income countries, allowing debt service payments due from May the 1st to the end of the year owed by the most impoverished countries to be suspended. The debt suspension will be extended by another 6 months until June the 30th, 2021. President Xi said in his speech that China will increase the level of debt suspension and relief for countries facing particular difficulties and encourage its financial institutions to provide new financing support. He affirmed China's commitment to help and support other developing countries through making COVID-19 vaccines a public good that is accessible and affordable around the world.
Portugal's Prime Minister Antonio Costa announced the country will ban domestic travel and close schools around two upcoming holidays in a bid to reduce the spread of coronavirus ahead of Christmas. Travel between municipalities will be banned from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. to prevent movement around national holidays. Schools will close on the Mondays before both holidays, while businesses must close early. Employers are being encouraged to give workers the day off in order to minimize travel activity. Masks, already mandatory in public and in closed commercial spaces, are now also mandatory in the workplace. Checks will increase to ensure that those who can are working remotely. A nighttime curfew and weekend lockdown after 1 p.m. in 191 municipalities since November 9th will continue in 174 municipalities with particularly high infection rates for a further 2 weeks.
Germany has identified 6 sites in the capital Berlin to be used as centers to administer the new coronavirus vaccination, an official at the Civil Protection Agency said, calling for volunteers to carry out the work. Project manager for vaccination centers at the Federal Agency for Technical Relief, the THW, Albert Brommen, said the sites, which include Berlin's trade fair as well as Tempelhof and Tegel airports, will be set up by mid-December. He added that although some volunteers would require a medical background, chief positions and such highly qualified people will not be needed. Broem said that he expected the Berlin Treptow site to need some 250 staff on duty all the time. Across Berlin, the goal will be to vaccinate 1 patient every 2 minutes. The centers are expected to be up and ready to go in 4 weeks. Germany is scouting trade fair halls and airport terminals to use as potential mass vaccination centers as it draws up plans to inoculate the nation as soon as the first coronavirus shot gains European approval. Vaccines will not be stored on site, but centrally in 3 huge freezers at minus 75 degrees before being thawed and taken to centers. Under the national vaccine strategy approved by its cabinet in October, Germany has asked the federal states to identify central vaccination centers, which will be supplemented by mobile teams who go into care homes.
Britain and Canada struck a rollover trade deal to protect the flow of 27 billion US dollars worth of goods and services between them after Brexit and vowed to start talks on a bespoke agreement next year. As Britain prepares to end its transition out of the European Union on December 31st, it has negotiated multiple rollover bilateral deals to maintain trade, with many simply replacing the terms the bloc had already agreed. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson joined Canada's Justin Trudeau and their respective trade ministers on an online call to mark the deal, which paves the way for a tailor-made agreement covering more areas such as digital trade, small businesses, the environment, and women's economic empowerment. Britain is Canada's 5th largest trading partner after the United States, China, Mexico, and Japan. Prime Minister Johnson is trying to shape a new global Britain that can strike out alone and negotiate better trade agreements than the EU, as part of what he says is the benefits of its historic decision to leave the world's biggest trading bloc. In less than 2 years, it has agreed trade deals with 53 countries, accounting for $217.82 billion of British bilateral trade. Johnson's critiques point out that many are largely the same as the EU deals.
This has been Business Review, your daily source for the most critical financial stories. Tune in next time for the latest financial news impacting the world economy.